Why walk when you can ride? Hello everyone, Rhett here, beaming to your view screens from the liminal slip space where Jeff keeps me when I'm not editing videos. Welcome to Craft Extra. Today, I'm gonna talk about Morrowind. So this video is going to be equal parts essay on what sets Morrowind apart from its sequels, and sermon on why you should be playing this game even in 2023. I'm not sure half of it is going to make sense, but hopefully by the time we're done, you're going to be thinking, hey, this game's pretty cool. So a few months back, Jeff and I were at PDXland. Oh my god, it was a year ago. March 2022. And we were having some beers with some other YouTubers, and among them was Logan from Tech Syndicate, who at the time had an upcoming video he was going to do about Morrowind. It has since been launched. I suggest you go check it out, and I've linked it in the video description. He had a lot of really cool things to say about it, but what really struck me was something he distilled and ended up putting into his video. He likened the Elder Scrolls to heavy metal genres. Now you can go watch the video for yourself to hear exactly what he has to say. But the short of it is that Skyrim is like your favorite heavy metal band, but they've sold out. Oblivion is more like the 80s hair metal, just big and glamorous. Morrowind, on the other hand, is prog metal. It's complex, it's nuanced, might even be a little intimidating to the outside, but for those who are willing to learn it and learn the vocabulary, there is a whole new world just within this genre. Now, obviously, Skyrim has dominated Elder Scrolls for like 11 years, and there is a reason. It's an absolutely fantastic game, and it's packed to the brim with deep content. The music is evocative. The setting inspires you to always seek just beyond the next hill, but few games can match the elation of not only learning why your attacks miss, but how to make them miss less, like you do in Morrowind. Let's backtrack a little bit, because I'm going to be talking about the Elder Scrolls games a lot. And for those of you who might not know much about the game, Morrowind is the third official installment in the Elder Scrolls series, and it really sets the tone for what players would come to expect out of an epic fantasy role-playing game. There's the massive, sprawling worlds, the highly curated attention to detail, the complex NPCs who often feel like people in their own right, branching narrative where your choices feel like they carry weight, and a robust character creation and leveling system to boot. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I am going to throw the word curated out a lot during this video, and I want to be a little bit clear about what that means. See, everything in these games is laid by hand, by designers, who love the game probably just as much as you do, and they've littered the world with Easter eggs and secrets to be discovered. And even though Skyrim and Oblivion are both ripe with things to find, Morrowind is just bursting. It's a treasure chest that hasn't stopped giving in 20 years. Let's take a look at this Eurogame article, for example. In it, author Keen Mar not only interviews an environmental designer who worked at Bethesda at the time, but he plumbs the depths of r/Morrowind on Reddit and ends up in an interview with a user called Occupy Tamriel, who spent an immense fraction of his time in-game cracking the many mysteries and secrets littered across the island. One such mystery is called Sotilda's Codebook. It's an item that you can find. And on first examination, Sotilda's Codebook looks like nothing more than a collection of gibberish. I could see myself populating my games with stuff like this to fill space, but Occupy Tamriel was convinced the words and letters of Sotilda's Codebook weren't just nonsense, that like the name suggested, it was actually code. When finally cracked, using a legitimate code cipher by the way, the book turned out to be a detailed journal of Sotilda's drug trafficking across the island of Vardenfell. These lovely little surprises, or Easter eggs for players to find, are the result of painstaking hard work and careful attention to detail. The environmental artist and designer who Keen Mar spoke to, Mark Bullock, he explains in the article that during the course of development, he moved from creating assets for locations we're all quite familiar with, like Seyda Lighthouse, or even the dragon statue at Ebonheart, to creating locations and architecture. Eventually, he found himself with more and more creative freedom to begin to insert anything he could dream up, when he had a mental image of a Nordic burial flash through his mind's eye. He made it as intricate as time allowed, trying to draw reference to the Nordic occupation of the island, and hid it in a place that very few players may ever find. That level of detail, for just a maybe you'll find it? Yeah, like I said, curated. In his article, Keen Mar himself links to this lovely little video from Imperatia here on YouTube, which is a detailed walkthrough of how to find the Nordic burial. Check it out in the video description. Let's get back on track. So, Oblivion and Skyrim perform their roles as sequels very dutifully. They expand on the game's scope and lore and serve to attract new players exceptionally well. Skyrim, for example, has been re-released so many times that it has essentially become the pillar of open-world RPGs, right? I really think that part of why Bethesda can re-release Skyrim so many times is the utter lack of comparable titles. Think of games that even come close to this level of detail. The highly curated, hand-laid, detail-oriented map designs and layouts. In 2002, when Morrowind came out, there was Gothic 2. I think that was a successful game. Certainly a baller title. I loved it. Probably one of my favorites. And probably because it shares a certain attention to detail with Morrowind. But it wasn't nearly as accessible, and that's probably partially because it's challenging control scheme. But back then, control schemes were sort of the Wild West. You did whatever you had to make them work. Now, I did try looking up other examples of games that I might be able to categorize this way, and I came across a recent list. Well, I wrote this script a really long time ago. Actually, the list is from March 2022. And in it, Game Rant listed 21 games that you should play after Skyrim. And over 8 of them were either Fallout or Elder Scrolls games, with 2 of the entries just straight up being the Fallout or Elder Scrolls series. Now, unfortunately, the list has been updated, so it's not exactly as it was when I saw it a year ago, but I've gone ahead and linked it in the video description. Now, personally, I'd argue that the only game in recent memory that even attempts to really do what Elder Scrolls does is a game like Kingdom Come: Deliverance from Warhorse Studios. The world is wide open, and it's evident that the placement of items, characters, locations, and events are all highly curated. But it has one very obvious distinction. It's historical. It's based on real-life locations, real-life people, real-life events. So much so, in fact, that recently, when I was working on this video, I decided to look at Google Maps to see where some of the locations in Kingdom Come: Deliverance are in real life, right? Because it's based on sort of Eastern Europe, the Czech Republic. It's actually even kind of unsettling how accurate the map of Kingdom Come: Deliverance is to real life. I went on Google Maps and looked at Ratai and compared the map to the in-game map, and it is disturbingly close. Now, does this mean that it was any easier to do? No. The game is quite the feat, and in all honesty is among my favorite titles of recent years, and even with its proximity to Elder Scrolls, reactions to it are a mixed bag, with the chief complaints being mostly about combat. Sound familiar? But the fact that only one game springs to mind does serve my larger point that I've been sort of circling around, which is that Elder Scrolls has largely been immune to copycats. Think about it. Some games are so wildly popular, so wildly good at what they do, that they become genres unto themselves. The game Rogue springs to mind, which spawned a massive genre called roguelikes. Whether or not you agree that modern roguelikes are at all like Rogue does not matter. Metroid and Castlevania transformed action-adventure titles and led to an aptly named Metroidvania genre, right? And back in 2011, 2 whole months before the release of Skyrim, From Software released a title so powerful, so inspiring, that games can sell themselves just by virtue of their proximity, and we call them Souls-like. And speaking of Souls games, Elden Ring, in my opinion, gets close to offering an experience that's much like Morrowind's was back in 2002. But the gameplay couldn't really be much different, right? When I played Elden Rings for the first time, I was struck by how it made me feel. I felt alone in such a way that the joy of discovery was mine, and there were things to find everywhere. But there was no guiding light. There was no thorough tutorial to guide you through its complex systems. You were dropped into a world which killed you almost instantaneously, unless you somehow knew how to beat this sword guy. But for those persistent enough to reverse engineer the game and suss out any understanding, you had an untapped world that was yours. And that is the feeling of Morrowind. Kind of getting back on track here, the question I keep asking myself, after the last 11 years in which we've seen a flood of clones, clone-likes, especially Souls-like games, why can't we say the same thing about Elder Scrolls? I say it's exactly their inimitable quality that not only defines Elder Scrolls, but it sets Morrowind above and apart. Now, I've played more than my fair share of Oblivion and Skyrim without a single complaint, and they are among the best-selling games of all time for a reason. Skyrim is continuing to this day to draw new players and inspire new memes every single day, but I say their success rests solely on the back of Morrowind. The groundwork was laid in 2002, with the leap from titanic, sprawling, procedurally generated maps of Daggerfall to the immaculate, hand-laid world of Morrowind. It made it a place that you could keep coming back to over and over, time and time again, and continue to find and see new things, a la Nordic Burial Ground, Sotilda's Code Book. So again, it's the inimitable quality that sets the bar. Morrowind takes the cake, and in a world where games and music and movies are constantly catering to the lowest common denominator, Morrowind took risks, it challenged its player, it dared you to learn. You see, because Morrowind is pushing its player on all fronts. Not only is the gameplay challenging, but the setting is challenging. See, the landscape is exotic and alien, the people are diverse and driven by their own wants and desires. Morrowind is an ambiguous place, both morally and physically. It sort of defies expectation and refuses to be put into a black or white box. And it's going to return that level of ambiguity to you and your character. See, as the game unfolds, you're going to find the struggles of each faction, each character, each deity, and so on are all ambiguous or morally gray. There's little, if anything, to define good or evil. The bad guys often seem to be just acting toward their version of good, or within good as it aligns with themselves or their factions, or just simply acting within the nature that they're born with or imparted to them by providence. And the so-called good guys are often doing pretty bad things all across the island. Off the top of my head, the only truly unambiguously bad thing in Morrowind is slavery. And it's because of this that one playthrough is going to yield vastly different interpretations than another. As you begin to understand the conflicts and the struggles of each faction, their motives are going to become clearer. And what seemed at first like a clear-cut example of good versus evil is just one guy murdering another in cold blood, probably for gold or land or slaves. And the concept of multiple playthroughs there shouldn't be too strange to Elder Scrolls players, even those new to Morrowind, but there is a clear distinction between the way Morrowind and its sequels handle this. It's the need for multiple playthroughs. In Oblivion and Skyrim, you can 100% complete the game with a single character. There's no need to grit and hustle. No, you can become Archmage, or President of the Fighters Union, Death's Hand of the Dark Brotherhood, or the Emperor of Skyrim and Tamriel, all on the same character. There's no stat requirements, there's no faction affiliation requirements, there's no prerequisites at all other than following the map marker from one spot to the next until you move from the bottom of the ladder to the top. I mean, that's one thing I really miss about Morrowind after playing a ton of Skyrim recently, is just how personal a lot of the quest lines are. There's no stealing the Elder Scrolls in the game. There's no murdering the Emperor in the game. Even the main conflict between the Nerevarine and Dagath-Ur is driven by a personal conflict that happened thousands of years ago. Morrowind, on the other hand, multiple playthroughs are not only encouraged, but they are expected. A player may simply make a character that makes advancing through the game difficult or impossible by nature of the way that their stats are allocated. That might require them to make a new character to make the game easier. There are also many paths in the game that you have to abandon in order to complete others. Sounds irritating, maybe even intimidating, but the hidden beauty of starting over as a matter of routine is that each time you do, you, the player, the human being behind the keyboard, levels up, and you take that experience with you into the next game. Thus, each character is bound to yield greater and greater results as you learn the best ways to navigate the complex world of Morrowind, but the complex systems that drive the game. If there were any doubts that the developers wanted players to be able to start over often, look no further than the pause menu. New is the first item you'll see. No need to exit the game or relaunch or go to the menu in any way. Just pause and click and you're off. You take with you the sacred knowledge that you acquired with that character. This is at the heart of what I think defines Morrowind as opposed to Skyrim. Players advance the game, not only by advancing their characters, leveling up, finding better gear and spells, revealing the map, and so on, but by advancing themselves in real life via their own personal knowledge of the game, its mechanics and rules, the world's customs, and the ways that things can be exploited and manipulated. Let's take a look at the game's introduction and see if this idea holds up. At the beginning of Morrowind, the game drops you off at the Imperial Customs Office in the coastal town of Seyda-Neen. There, you're prompted to pick your race, sex, class, and birth sign. You're given instructions on how to navigate menus, pick up, equip, and use items, how to talk to NPCs, and ultimately, you're given papers and you're sent on your way. All told, it takes someone familiar with the game less than 2 minutes before they are untethered and let loose. The genius of the game's introduction, though, is not that you can choose to become a murder hobo in a mere 3.5 minutes. Well, okay, no, actually, I mean, that is part of it. That's a huge part of it, right? That's kind of what I'm getting at. But by bypassing it and ignoring it altogether, you learn another lesson. And that's to say that the game's intro doesn't just end the moment you pass customs. Seyda-Neen in and of itself is a finely curated tutorial representative of the world at large. It encourages you to speak to people, explore, fight, shop, take on quests, lie, cheat, steal, to learn that doing the right thing never pays and that ultimately the world of Morrowind just doesn't care about you. It doesn't care what you do or what you don't. You can pack your bags and walk right out of Seyda-Neen and never look back, hopefully learning that you can and will skip that which appears on the surface to be uninteresting, and leaving behind only the valuable lessons that Bethesda carefully sprinkled out for the curious player. Now, I'm not sure how many first-time players just bomb right out of town, but I can venture a guess that most new players are going to learn their first valuable lesson right out of the door. See, right when you think you're free, you're going to meet one of video games' most hated characters, Fargoth. The lesson, which only costs you a magic ring that you presumably just found, is that sometimes helping the right people can open new doors. See, Fargoth is friends with the local merchant, and for returning his ring, he'll put in a good word and significantly strengthen your reputation with him, thus allowing you to buy and sell at far more favorable prices than you could otherwise. But an especially curious player may quickly learn yet another lesson, that there is almost always more to a story than what's first apparent on the surface. Fargoth isn't as well connected as he lets on, with Ariel the merchant being pretty much his one true friend. In fact, he's taken to hiding his money in a nice little hole for just the wrong person to chance upon. All in all, Seyda-Neen boasts a large purse of missing tax collections, magical swords that just fall from the sky, battle axes hidden away for a rainy day, sneaky nighttime skullduggery, slavery, smuggling, drug trafficking, haunted tombs, shipwrecks. It's all right there for the player to discover, or not, as they so desire. And many new players bypass these things only to discover what they missed on later playthroughs. See, the things that echo through every Skyrim forum that discourages new players from giving Morrowind a go, things like the walking speed, the random hit chance, just to name a few, are things that the wizened player have learned to overcome quickly. So quickly, in fact, that most of them can be overcome from the census office while you're creating your character. But beyond just being the challenges that need to be overcome, experienced players know that these things are also exploitable via potions, enchantment, spells, and the like. And if that sounds like it may cheapen the game, well, the lessons learned while progressing yourself as the player either haven't stuck or just haven't yet been earned. Let me lay out an example. The new player may often die to mud crabs and rats, getting in over their heads with little to no fatigue remaining. They swing their brand new enchanted battle axe, but they have no skill with axes. They slowly get pinged to death while wearing their super awesome heavy armor. But they're not skilled in heavy armor, they're only skilled in light. Maybe if they persist, they will have advanced to Slayer of Rats in the Fighters Guild, only to quickly learn that they can no longer take missions from them, because they don't meet the minimum qualifications for rank advancement, and therefore they don't meet the minimum qualifications for new missions. The Fighters Guild sounded fun to this player, but their character is more of a rogue, focusing on stealth, speed, security, and attacking with short blades while wearing light armor. Say this new player is just absolutely not interested in doing the Thieves Guild with this character. Maybe they've already been poisoned by the Fighters Guild propaganda, or maybe they want to train the appropriate skills to advance, but they just didn't make it easy on themselves due to their current stat allocation, and it's just going to cost them too much to get to where they want to be. This might be the moment that they pause. They press that fancy new button in the pause menu. The new player is now progressed to level 2, as it were. Not the character, the player. This time, they build their character to favor heavy armor, to swing heavy weapons. This time, they don't miss some of the goodies in Satanin, so they have a bigger wallet when it comes time to train. This brings me to another point that kind of sets this game apart. The progressed player is going to learn how to quickly leverage the game to their advantage. Bethesda knew that no one was going to have time to cast and fail a simple spell over and over and over and over, or to whack an enemy a billion times. So they implemented training. This is a simple transaction of gold for a skill increase. This single aspect is what makes gold far more valuable to the player in Morrowind than the other games. Because again, you can't advance some quests without advancing your skills. Of course, there's training in Skyrim. It's Elder Scrolls. All the trappings are there, but in Skyrim, there is no minimum stat requirement necessary to prove your worth to a guild, to accept more and more advanced missions. In fact, you can be the Archmage of the College of Winterhold, the President of the Fighters Guild, the Prime Reaper of the Dark Brotherhood, and the Emperor of Skyrim, Tamriel, and Nirn all at once, on the same character that doesn't have the stats for it. You're gonna need gold to quickly and easily advance and take on new guild missions in Morrowind. And that may sound like it cheapens character advancement, simply reducing it down to a mere transaction. But I say again, I'm talking about player advancement. Player advancement runs in tandem with character advancement. The importance of training is simply not something a lot of first-time players are going to pick up on. And when you realize how invaluable, how necessary training is to the game, what naturally follows is an understanding of the game's economy, how stats are inextricably linked to it, and that via the economy, stats are but one more thing to exploit to your advantage. In an ancient and infamous forum post by a user called Cretaceous Bob, he called Morrowind a, quote, brilliant accident. And on one hand, if you know anything about what it takes to make a game, they're certainly all accidents, right? But on the other hand, Morrowind often feels like anything but an accident. Everything that makes this game a challenge, that begs to be understood, it reeks of deliberate choice. No game lets you chug a potion that'll let you just punch a god to death on accident. No game lets you kill key NPCs and obstruct your own completion of the game on accident. Going all the way back to Sotilda's codebook, there was a person placing everything by hand. And, well, the accidents that there were, like a devilish hellspawn that accosts you across the entire island that just needs to be eradicated, well, hey, sure, that's a mistake. But in 2023, it wasn't an accident. It's been perfectly retconned, thanks to the cunning Saint Giub. Blessed be his name, the eradicator of the winged menace. I haven't mentioned Keem yet, mostly because this video isn't about Keem, and it's a really complex piece of Elder Scrolls lore that I'm not really going to dive into. But I do think that if I'm going to hang my thesis in opposition to Cretaceous Bob's brilliant accident, I do think that Keem is sort of a nice nail to hang all of my arguments off of. Because if there is any question that the player shares equal importance with their character, then I think Keem is going to answer them. And I know I said I wasn't going to explain Keem, but to give you the Cliff's Notes version, Keem is the ultimate enlightenment and understanding of reality. There are only a few who have ever achieved it in the history of the Elder Scrolls, and there's reason to suspect that it may have played a role in the disappearance of the Dwemer. When you begin to try to understand Keem as a player of the game, it almost begs you to draw a connection between yourself and your character, and the world that you are both inhabiting. How, as you move your avatar through the game world and advance your own understanding of the game, you step closer to the in-game concept of Keem, the realization that our characters are but dreams within a dream world. Like René Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." And so too does your character, through you. The simultaneous reality of being in the game, but being real, being alive, but fictional. It's like Neo reborn within the Matrix. The code is now clear, and it can be rewritten. It can be bent whichever way he sees fit. So too can those individuals, wise enough to achieve Keem, manipulate their reality. via the Morrowind construction kit, right? The Morrowind construction kit is just the thing for those progressed players to whom the reality of the game is lacking. Because with the Morrowind construction kit, the reality can be whatever you choose it to be. And it's with the Morrowind construction kit that a 20-year-old game assumes new life on a near routine basis at this point. Which is ultimately what I meant this video to be about in the first place. You know, tangents aside about player progression versus character progression and what sets it apart from Skyrim and Oblivion. It's been 20 years and this game continues to be reinvented and reinvigorated by an amazing community. And if what I said here hasn't yet persuaded you to give the game a go, then I invite you to come join us on the subreddit r/Morrowind and see how many awesome people there once were in your very shoes that are now playing Morrowind and enjoying it. And for the rest of us, if you're not modding Morrowind, what are you doing? I enjoy vanilla Morrowind just as much as anybody, but they haven't stopped creating reasons to come back to this game. Whether it's full reconstruction mods like Tamriel Rebuilt or Morrowind Rebirth, you can now even play Morrowind in VR and in multiplayer, and you can do them at the same time. It just never ends, and with OpenMW, it's even easier. I mean, the modding community has kept this game going, far more in a way than Skyrim. And although Skyrim has some great mods out now, and Bethesda has done some work to make integration a lot easier. And oh my god, if you haven't done it yet, check out Enderall Forgotten Stories. It is a complete reconstruction mod of Skyrim that stands apart on its own. But Morrowind has it all with mods. Like, you want to roll dice in game, you want to create your full custom library, you want new quest lines, new characters, new clothes, weapons. Maybe you just want the game to look like a gem, a sparkly high definition gem with beautiful HD texture packs. Well, you can get them all, and it's not hard anymore thanks to OpenMW, which is the first full decompiling of Morrowind that lets you run it natively on modern systems. It's easier than ever. I plan on making other videos soon about some of my favorite mods. Nothing like Tech Syndicate's 200 mod setup, but if that's something that you want to see, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this video with your fellow RPG lovers. Maybe 2023 is going to be the year that you play Morrowind, and I can't wait to hear about your adventures over on Twitter, @RedIsAwesome, or on the Discord via Patreon, patreon.com/craftcomputing. Until then, y'all, if you like to dance close to the fire, don't. Cheers.